There are many viable setups for multiboxing frigate Abyssals. Need 2 DPS and 1 Logi ship or 3 DPS ships. In this video I show you some well working setups to multibox frigate Abyssals. Before we look at the fits, let's also talk about the difference between 2 DPS and 1 Logi or 3 DPS ships. Multiboxing 2 DPS ships and 1 Logi is usually easier, as in most of the rooms you do not have to micromanage the Logi. At the beginning of the room you just activate the remote repairs on the DPS ships, then you forget about the Logi till you go to the next room. So technically in that case you're only really managing 2 ships actively. However, if you multibox 3 DPS ships, then you have to do a lot more micromanagement, because you also have to do the target 3 ships rather than 2, and if you use a setup with remote repairs like the triple Nergal, then you also have to pay attention on all 3 characters and who is taking damage and who needs remote repairs and so on. Now let's look at the fits. First we're gonna look at the combination of 2 DPS and 1 Logistic frigate. The classic in this are 2 Retribution and a Deacon. The first fit I'm gonna show you is the cheapest multibox setup, and it is also probably the best to learn multiboxing frigate Abyssals. There are 2 very cheap Retributions that you see here, with beam laser, remote repairs, a meta, AB battery, basic tank DPS, more DPS rigs and an EM rig, and as well as ammunition. Of course you need more crystals. And this fit, one of them only costs 55.3 million. Need a second of those, as well as a Deacon that I'll show you now. This is the Deacon for this setup. You have Tech 2 remote repairs, AB battery, full tank in the low slots, and some cap rig and EM rig in the rigs. So this setup is total around 170 million ISK and is therefore very cheap to start learning multiboxing frigate Abyssals. With these ships you can do up to tier 3 electrical. I made a video specifically on these, so go check that out if you want to know more. The next fit I show you is the T6 electrical throwaway Retribution setup. This is actually a bit of an upgrade from the previous one, and with that setup you can do up to T6 electricals. However, there are some scenarios where you will die with this setup, like if you get a lot of Kikimoras that like to come close, wrecking shot from Kirin, overmine and so on. It is mostly Tech 2 fit, but for higher tiers you actually need deadspace remote repair, as well as some implants, because otherwise you might time out in some case because you don't have enough DPS. And this is the Deacon for the 2 Retributions I showed before. As you see, it has some more tank modules that are a little bit more expensive, and deadspace remote repair and a faction battery. So this setup in total is around 500 million ISK, and it is suitable for doing tier 6 electricals. For that setup I made a specific video, feel free to check it out. The next setup I'm showing you at Eve Workbench, because there you can combine fleets. This is another setup for T6 electricals, which is actually more sustainable and also very fast. it has a pulse and a beam retribution. This is the pulse retribution. As you see, it doesn't have a reactive armor hardener like the others. Instead, it has a thermal, an EM hardener, as well as a multi-spectrum coating and a thermal reinforcer. So even without something like a plate or so, but with amulet implants, we get actually like 12k EHP to be able to tank wrecking shots from Kirin and Overmind. We also have remote repairs to repair the Deacon. Then this is the beam setup, beam fit, which is also almost the same, just has A-type thermal hardener so that it has the CPU to fit the beam lasers. And this is the Deacon, which actually does have a reactive armor hardener. And with this setup you can do T6 electricals, and that actually very fast. I made with this setup a video on T5 electricals, and the average clear time with this setup was around 8 minutes per site. But this included the event drugs, the Whitestorm Vitarka booster that gave another 10% DPS. Now we're gonna look at setups for Firestorms. The first setup that I show you is also the one that I made like 3 years ago and that I streamed first in around 2021. And there are simply 2 beam retributions and a Deacon. This is the tank retribution. As you see, high slots beam lasers, AB, battery. And here comes the special thing about the tank retribution. It has a thermal armor hardener, a reactive and a multi-spectrum coating and another thermal rig. So this makes it so that with this retribution you are able to tank a full Kikimora spawn in T6 if you have all remote repairs on that retribution. And if DPS still gets to it, then you can still overheat the thermal hardener to get even more tank against Kikimoras. And this is the DPS fit. It has 3 heat sinks and no reactive, and it has a thermal coating instead of the thermal hardener, so that the tank doesn't need any cap at all. Because it is often so in rooms with a lot of newts. The newts like to go to the DPS ship after some time, and it is not rarely the case that it is fully neuted out. And if that ship doesn't need cap to keep its tank run, that makes it easier to keep it alive. So if this ship gets neuted out, then you only have to spam the beam lasers, and then you can even load standard that use less cap so that you can keep your DPS running. And this is the Deacon for this setup. With remote repairs, AB, battery, tank and a flux coil. Actually you can swap this for a power relay to get more cap buffer and to make it less likely to get it fully neuted out. The next Firestorm frigate setup is probably known to those that have been watching my streams in the past few weeks. It is a pulse and beam retribution together with a Deacon. And this setup actually focuses a little bit more on cap recharge than tank, so that it can keep its DPS running in rooms with a lot of newt pressure. Actually, the pulse retribution is very similar to the beam retribution that I showed before. The only differences are that you need a Senti A-type multispectrum coating and an X-type thermal hardener, and instead of the thermal armor rig, it has a CCC rig and it uses some rapture implants to get more cap recharge rate. Then here is the Beam Retribution, which is more or less just the same as before. Thermal rig, coating, multi-spectrum, 3 DPS modules, beam lasers, and also this tool uses Rapture, but it doesn't really need a capacitor control circuit because as this tank ship doesn't have any modules that require cap other than the beam lasers, so it doesn't need as much cap recharge than this setup, because you need cap to run those two modules. And the Deacon is exactly the same as before. Now we're gonna swap the tank retribution out for our Nergal. This is the next setup and I used it a lot. Those that watch my streams know this setup. This is the Nergal that is for the tank. It has a disintegrator, remote repair, AB dual battery, and in the low slots it has a reactive horn and 3 entropic sinks. And a lot of people make me aware that this does not fit, it doesn't have the CPU. Well, that is actually true. You have to use Abyssal entropic sinks with green CPU to be able to fit this. Alternatively, you can also use the CPU implant and the weapon upgrade implants, which increase CPU capacity and reduce the CPU needed for the disintegrator to make this fit even easily. And then the DPS retribution is the same as before, as well as the Deacon, it's also the same. Now we also switch the weather from Firestorm to Gamma. There is another setup that you can use to run Gammas. And there's again Nergal Retribution and Deacon. The tank Nergal is different than before. It has only 2 entropic sinks and a plate, because in Gammas you don't have the armor HP bonus and therefore you need an armor plate to compensate this. And the rigs are kinetic and explosive. Your Gamma has an explosive resistance penalty. What is actually worth to consider with this frigate is to use some Abyssal AB to get more speed, because the armor plate lowers the speed that you get from AB as it increases the mass. So you might want to consider using an Abyssal afterburner. But as an armor plate doesn't use as much CPU than the entropic radiation sink, fitting this is actually a little bit easier compared to the Firestorm Nergal. Then this is the retribution for DPS, the beam lasers, and here we have to use a storyline remote repair, because otherwise it doesn't fit. AB battery. We have a multi-spectrum coating, plate, and 3 DPS modules. DPS rig and a thermal armor reinforcer. And to make this fit, you have to use Genolution implants 1 and 2, because otherwise it doesn't have CPU and power grid to fit all. You can also consider using mutoplasmids on the plates and AB to make it fit a little bit easier, but this can get very quickly very expensive. And here we have the Deacon for Gammas. This again remote repairs in the high. We have 2 Senti and 1 Corelli, AB battery, and lows we have an armor plate reactive, and then we have some energized harness. You can also use active harness, but the active harness aren't much better than the Corpum A-type EM hardener. Like the Centus X-type EM hardener gives like 56% EM resistance, and that Corpum A-type gives 51%, so it's not that much difference, but they don't use cap, meaning that you can keep your cap to run the remote repairs. Also, we don't have a power relay because, again, Gamma don't have armor HP bonus, so we somehow need more tank in the low slots to compensate this, so that you can keep your Logi alive longer. I have made a video specifically on this setup, so go check it out. And now we go into Dark Abyssals again. And this is also a setup that I used to stream a lot like a year ago. And this is the Hawk, Skybreaker plus Kirin or Scalpel setup. The Hawk is the tank that you see here. There's rocket launcher, remote shield booster, AB battery, shield extender, multi-spectrum hardener and an EM amplifier, ballistic control systems. To make this fit, you also have to use Channellution implants, or you can mutate some modules like the shield extender, AB battery to make it fit easier. And some implants for DPS and DPS support and drugs. And in the rigs we have a payloading accelerator and explosive shield reinforcer so that we are able to tank our full Kikimora with all the repairs on the Hawk. Then this is the Skybreaker. There's a water projector, AB, extender, hardener and a web. And we actually need a web because rockets have limited range, and we need the web that we are able to get close to the overmind, because otherwise we won't be in range for your rockets. Low slots are damage modules. We have an EM and thermal shield reinforcer and a capacitor control circuit. It doesn't have a battery, but the Skybreaker has a very fast cap recharge rate, and with the CCC rig it gets even faster, so that you can keep your gun running even when it gets neutered a lot. Because just like before, NPCs that you'd like to go for the Skybreaker, and with that you can keep your water project running a little bit longer. And for the Logistic, here we have two options. First is the Kirin, and the second is the Scalpel. Both have some advantages and disadvantages. The Kirin has a bit more tank and buffer because it has a bonus to shield HP. But what its drawback is that the signature radius of this ship is a little bit higher, meaning that it gets hit a lot more often than the Scalpel. The Scalpel, however, has a very small signature radius, but its tank isn't very good, and the Scalpel can even die to a wrecking shot from Kirin or the Overmind. So you have to decide what you prefer. Do you prefer having a stronger tank but that gets hit a lot more, or something that doesn't get hit a lot but actually can die to wrecking shots from battleships? There's also a video about that setup that you can find here, so go check it out. Now we look at the multi-box setups that use 3 DPS ships. The first setup, or the simple throwaway, Hawks to do T6 Dark Abyssals. This is the setup that was once made by Ibeast. It is a very cheap Hawk that can do T6 Darks. However, this fit will always die to Angel rules. This is a more reliable setup for T6 Dark. It is Lokival The Nub's T6 Dark combination. It is also 3 Hawks, but this fit is a little bit more expensive as it has a deadspace shield booster to get even more tank. And one of the Hawk has an ADC and the other two have two ballistic control systems for maximum DPS. This Hawk can survive the easier angel rooms and some more bad room combination, but it still can die to some bad angel rooms or rooms with a lot of damage where you have issues applying DPS. The setup here is the triple Nergal setup to do T5 or T6 Firestorm. This is made by Lokival The Nub. This is the tank Nergal, which has a disintegrator, remote repair in the high slots, AB, battery and cap booster in the mids, ADC, dual rep and multispectrum in the low, tank and cap rig, drones and implants. And this tank Nergal is taking all the aggro when you enter a new room. So it has enough repair power to tank through most of the reps, plus it has the remote repairs from the other two DPS Nergals. And these is the DPS Nergal, which has again remote repair and disintegrator. Instead of a cap boost, it has a second battery. It's only one repair and two entropic sinks. Thermal rig and cap control circuit rig to get more cap recharge rate. Some implants and drones. These are meant to be the DPS ships. The tanks takes all the aggro, and the DPS ships, they are focused more on DPS. But as I said before, triple boxing 3 DPS ships is harder than 2 DPS ship and 1 Logi. Because if the triple Nergal setup or the triple Hawks or any other triple DPS setups, you have to do a lot more micromanaging. Like with that setup, you have to pay attention who is taking a lot of damage, and then you have to activate the remote repairs on that specific target to tank it, and then the red switch. Then you have to switch remote repairs on all 3 ships, while on the setup with a Deacon, you most of the time activate the remote repairs when you enter the room, and then you forget about it for the rest of the room. And that's it for this video. I hope you found it helpful. Let me know in the comments what do you think about those multi-box setups. Do you know any more multi-box setups and so on? In the description you find links to my Discord, Twitch and the Marquee Dragon store, as well as to forum posts about bringing back the arena. Thank you for watching and see you next time.